Good morning, guys. Hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about pieces of advice I have for moving on from a relationship. The first thing I would say is self-esteem, and making sure you keep your self-esteem high, regardless of the situation. You know, whenever you're with someone for a certain time period, you trust them and believe them when they say, I love you. And suddenly, during a breakup, you lose that. And so, you question a lot of things, and, that in itself hurts your self-esteem. Just because no one's telling you, I love you. And, you might get into bad headspaces about whether anyone else is going to tell you, I love you again. Excuse me. You have to realize that you are lovable regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not. Your self-worth isn't defined by another human being. Second thing I want to say is, good people can move on from each other. I think often the narrative has to be that people need to view each other as enemies or things of that nature. Two good people can move on, if they have personality differences, if they have communication differences, if they have different wants from life, if they have value differences. It's important to understand that. Another thing I want to talk about, and this is maybe to the couple that it wasn't the right time or for the relationship, and maybe they have hope for it, in a future time, or maybe that, if the situation is right in a future time, they might get back together. Whether that's right now they're in two different geographic locations. Like, this is one of those where the circumstances defined why they broke up, in terms of being in two different geographic locations, being in two different parts of life. One's in high school, one's in college, one's in working professional, whatever the differences are. You know, anytime you're in a committed relationship of any sort, having the ability to take a step back and decommit yourself for a certain time period can be good. Taking yourself away from that can help you reflect on your overall balance in life. And so I think, experiencing what it's like being in the relationship and then experiencing what it's like not to be in the relationship, I think having that perspective can be good, and can be healthy, should you want to come back together later in life. The fourth thing I want to talk about was, give yourself time to grieve. This is a huge one. I mean, I think so many times friends' advice is to try to get their, hurt friend to move on quickly. Whether that be going to a bar the next weekend or the 2 weekends later and trying to get them to meet someone else new. And the reason why this doesn't work is you have to understand, anytime something emotional like a breakup happens, there's always going to be a wound. And until you heal from the wound, you won't be ready for a new relationship. And trying to compensate for that wound by, finding someone else is really not healing that wound. Um, that's, and I think that's where people term have that term rebounding, because, you really haven't moved on from the person, but you don't want to deal with those feelings, so you're just trying to um, see if it'll work with someone else. And the real key, you'll realize is really to give yourself time to grieve. And don't put a time limit on that. That could be 4 months, that could be 6 months, that could be a year. I mean, whatever time that you need to make peace and be wholly present. The other part of that is, anytime you've been in a relationship, you let your guard down, right? And you let the person see yourself in ways that no one else has seen you, right? When you're spending one-on-one time with someone for a long time period, and you're hanging out a lot, they know you in ways that no one does, and you know them in ways no one does. Not even their best friends. Our relationship selves are a very unique part or side of our identity. Another thing I would say, I don't know, I'm not sure what number I'm on, but try not to drag the relationship breakup. And again, especially based on what I said, this is extremely tough, because there's an emotional connection there, and because true love is amazing. I find in most cases that a lot of my friends' breakups, can last 3 months, 4 months. I mean, from this time that they start talking to the time it officially ends. Um, and if that's the case, that's the case. But, I think that can be unhealthy because you're going back in and out of your emotions, and you just don't know what's going on in your life, and so I would try, and it's tough, and it's much easier said than done, but I would try and, as best you can, when you do make a relationship breakup, really stick to it. Try to end most communication, try not to see them, things of that nature. The other thing I would say is, in this topic is, if you feel like you guys are really meant for each other, but you're just not doing a good job communicating, I would encourage giving yourselves a time for a break. And I would really say, if you do that and you don't call it a breakup, I would really define what a break is, what the terms are, and give yourself a time limit upon which to say, okay, we're going to come back at this point and at least say something, if you want to do it after a month break or a 2-month break. Because I think often when you love someone, communicating with someone you love, especially when you're hurt or when you're upset about something, is hard. And giving yourself time for a break can be good because you can find ways to express yourself. I think of a friend of mine who was upset with her significant other, they had been together for, over a year, and I think he didn't get her a Valentine's Day card. And suddenly her behavior became more passive aggressive, and she wasn't as excited about the relationship. But and so, a couple of months later, they, were at a point where they were going to break up. And I told her, have you, rightly communicated that to him? And not saying, I mean, obviously he should have known that. I mean, Valentine's Day is a big day, but did you communicate how you felt, or did you just um, sweep it on the rug and just dealt with it on your own? Um, and I think that for her, that, taking a break allowed her to realize, there were things that she wasn't communicating. And just because she didn't want to, it's tough having these conversations, but she didn't want to have the conversation, so she was just hoping that the feeling of, anger or upsetness would go away. But communication is ultimately, expressing how you are feeling is so important, because no one can read your mind. And consistently sweeping things under the rug will build up, your how upset you are, and it's gonna come out at some point. And the other person's not gonna understand where all this anger is coming from, because you've never talked to them about it. So that's where I think a break can be helpful in trying to figure out what exactly you want said to the other person. Um, One other thing I want to say is, sometimes you don't know what you want in life, right? I mean, I think um, we have to realize, there are 60, 70-year-olds still trying to figure out how to be the best parent, how to be, the best, in their professional career, and things of that nature. And for young kids, in their late teens or early 20s or mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, wherever you are, to know exactly what you want is a hard thing to ask from yourself. And, love is confusing. And, because there are certain compromises you'll always have to make on a person. No one's perfect. And are the compromises that you're making worth, does it mean it's worth spending, the rest of my life with that person? Um, and that's another point too, is I think overthinking um, can really hurt people, um, starting to, when you're thinking about like engagement talks, and starting to think about, can I spend the next 40, 50 years with that person? That puts a lot of pressure on you. And I think, it's very tough, but I would say try as much to stay in the present, day by day, you know. Um, Thinking about a 40-year commitment puts a lot of pressure on you. But just thinking about, this is what I want today, this is what I want tomorrow, that's a better mindset. And obviously, again, much easier said than done. Um, you know, I would say, one other thing that I would say is end on a good note if you can. Obviously, if there are legitimate reasons for being upset, then obviously there's no need to end on a good note. But one of the things that I've seen is, obviously, as human beings, especially this year with COVID, we've realized that, none of us know when our time is up. Um, Today I could walk outside and get hit by a car because the driver was texting and lost control of the car, and that would not be anything that was my fault, but just simply wrong place, wrong time, right? Um, and I've seen where, and this has mostly been in family situations, but where people have not mended a relationship, and then the other person passes away, and the other person um, feels guilty for not ever, reaching out and ending on a positive note or mending the relationship. And, I think it's easy subjectively when you're mad at a person to view them as a bad person. But when you objectively look at a situation, when you've been with someone for 2, 3, 4, however many years, you know in the back of your mind they're a good person. You wouldn't have been with them for years on end if they weren't. Um, did they handle maybe a breakup or an argument the best way? Maybe not. But in my estimation, I think it's always best, anytime anyone enters into your life, to leave them better than they found you. Um, and so that's obviously just my opinion that I would, um, you know, just end on a good note. Um, because ultimately it does say things about the two people's characters in a breakup if you're not able to end on a good note. Um, yeah, and then the final, I think, most important advice is forgive yourself. Right? There's always going to be mistakes and actions, communications. Um, you know, you have to, hindsight's always 20/20, and you have to realize you were doing the best you could at that time, and that's all you could ask from yourself. Um, you know, I have a friend who was going through like a lot of personal issues, um, and then that ultimately led to a breakup, and you know, um, and it's been tough for him because he is now in a lot better of a place, but it's just, it's tough. It's obviously tough because he wishes he was in that place at that time while they were in the relationship. But I mean, that's the tough part about life. You have to go through the lessons in order to learn and in order to be wiser, unfortunately. And the other thing I would say is forgive them. If they've hurt you, if they've wronged you, um, holding on to anger is not the smart choice. By holding on to anger, you allow them to affect your emotional well-being. And I think by forgiving them, you release that. Um, so that would be, my opinion. I think especially that's a much healthier way of moving on and healing the wound. But again, I mean, if it's something where you feel like you've been really wronged and you are upset, or you do want to hold on to the anger, I mean, that's your legitimate choice. I just think for your own health, it's probably better to forgive them, let them know you've forgiven them, and that's a much easier way to move on to a new relationship. So, I hope this has helped. I'm not sure how many pieces of advice I gave, but let me know if there's something else I missed or didn't talk about. Thanks, guys. Hey, guys, one other thing that came to my mind is that, if you're having trouble moving on, remember that time heals, and it won't feel like that in the moment, and especially when it's fresh. But realize that though you don't see it now, that time will heal the hurt, the sadness, and things of that nature. Thanks, guys.